Sweden keeps its winters neat. Plowed lanes, salted steps, the kind of quiet that sounds curated. But in a village 3 hours north of Uppsala, the night adopted a habit. At midnight, every midnight, a human silhouette stood on a different roof. Not moving, not waving, facing the street like a watch posted for a war no one declared. People closed curtains, but you always look once more when someone is above you. Welcome to Somnolent Conspiracies, where detection keeps company with dread but never lets go of the ledger. The local police tried the obvious things first. Curfews, drones, dogs on leads. The figures never ran. They simply weren't there when the boots reached the tiles. No footprints on the snow except where it made sense. No ladder marks in fresh drift. No handprints on the chimney brick. Some nights there were 2 silhouettes. On the 3rd week, when the sun returned like a pale coin and the frost let go of nails, the village woke to an emptier quiet. A retiree didn't answer her door, an electrician missed a service call, and the woman who baked bread for everyone's Saturdays left her oven cold. Our investigator isn't fond of haunted. She is fond of roofs, of pitch and loads, and how tar talks when it warms. She believes in blister patterns, in the ethics of ladders, and in what people will do for the chance to watch their neighbors watch them. We'll log wind and infrasound, count missing slates, inventory the old radio tower that should have stayed dismantled. We'll test the difference between a person who can stand still for hours and a shape a village makes out of fear. And we'll ask what happens when a community performs its own surveillance until someone decides to answer back from higher ground. Button your coat. The ridge is slick, the eaves are thin, and the street below is full of people pretending not to look up. The village of Hamarvik looked neat even under a sky that felt heavy enough to split the roofs. The snowbanks were clean-cut. The lanes had that pale granular sheen you get when salt has done its work and the cold has done it back. Detective Arundel stepped out of the municipal Skoda and listened to the kind of quiet that pretends to be neutral. It wasn't. Somewhere under it, the quiet had picked a side. Inspector Maya Lin's hand was gloved, but her greeting was not. "You're the roof person," she said, leading Aaron toward the Andersons with a practiced, compact stride. "Environmental crimes by title, but roofs by habit, yes. Roofs by physics," Aaron said. "They tell on people, and people think they're higher than consequences up there." They walked past curtains that pretended not to move. The houses were the same pitched language in different dialects. Steep gables, black tile or slate, chimneys with small hats to shrug off snow. The Andersons' cottage sat at the bend like a face turned to hear better. A ladder still leaned against the eaves, the rungs dusted with sparkle that didn't survive the first touch of a hand. Maya briefed while they moved. 21 days of midnight silhouettes. 3 disappearances in the last 5 nights. Berg at home, retired nurse. Oscar Nyberg, electrician. Lena Berg, baker. You think the silhouettes and the missing are the same story. I think we don't have the luxury of 2. They ducked under police tape. The snow on the lawn was combed by boots and then combed again when a supervisor realized they'd been too eager and started over. The air had that faint copper cut that sometimes rides off transformers and sometimes rides off something else. Aaron cataloged the smell and filed it where neither option made her happy. "Show me the footage," Aaron said. Maya cued it on a tablet with a cracked corner. The timestamp ticked past 0:03. Street-level body cam. A patrol's breath strobed white in a headlamp's cone. Across the road, a ridge-lined shadow on the Andersons' gable, the figure dead still, facing the street. It wasn't a smear or a camera artifact. The edges were too honest. The patrol's partner swore softly. At 6 minutes and 41 seconds, the camera jostled as they set the ladder. At 7 minutes and 4 seconds, the lens cleared the eaves, swung to the ridge, and found only clean snow, a seam of tile, a blank sky. No scuffs, no avalanche of powder down the lee slope. Just absence, documented in high definition. "Did the ridge shed?" Aaron asked. She was already walking the line between house and street where the gutters drip when the day gives up the sun. "Snow load charts say no," Maya said. "We logged temperatures, wind, accumulations. The lee side didn't slide. No trough marks in the drift. The neighbor's dog refused to go out. Not probative, but memorable. Erin crouched, glove off, to touch the lowest tile of the gable. The chill ate the heat out of her fingers with a directness she respected. She stood and looked up, not at the ridge but at the angles that connected ridge to eye. The human habit of looking is a tool like any other. Someone had used it here the way you use a nail gun, fast, loud, decisive. Inside, the Andersons had been moved to a neighbor's. Their house smelled of stale cinnamon and carefulness. Erin took the back stairs 2 at a time and let herself onto the roof through a hatch the Andersons' insurance would have frowned at. Maya followed, slower, testing each rung by habit and by oath. The tiles were glazed ceramic in a blue so dark it wanted to be black. Erin's soles found purchase on the dusting of dry snow and then kept it. She kept her weight low and distributed, walking the roof as though it were listening for mistakes. Close to the ridge, the snow thinned and then surrendered. Beneath it, the tar had softened and healed and softened again a dozen times over winter, a body that remembered every touch. "What are you seeing?" Maya asked. "Blisters," Erin said. "In line, heel to toe." She traced a path for Maya to see, an alternating constellation of bulges, then ruptures. But the ruptures sagged inward, not flared outward. A foot that pressed and heated from above. The tar swelled around it. Then when the load moved on, the skin pulled inward. They're recent enough that the cold hasn't ironed out the memory. "Someone stood there," Maya said. "Not a cutout, not a trick of the light. Someone or something that carried weight like a someone. But see here." Erin shifted, knelt by the ridge cap, and touched the metal gently with the back of her knuckles the way you greet a dog you don't know. Snow grains have a scalloped edge, as if they melted at midnight and refroze before dawn. Our resident stood during the nightly temperature dip. Exposed cap, short window, precise. The chimney crown had 2 shallow abrasions, parallel, each 42 centimeters apart. Erin measured with her hand and then with a tape, because superstition and accuracy make good colleagues. Folding roof hook ladder, custom radius on the hook, probably 21 centimeters to clear this crown without biting too deep. Whoever climbed this roof isn't guessing. They know pitch, clearance, where the tar pools under common footfall to make their work easier, not harder. Maya scanned the sky. A row of spruces at the edge of the lane leaned as if agreeing with something above their competence. The drone guys wanted to fly again tonight. "Ground them," Erin said. "Gust advisories?" "Half the county," Maya said. "We can brute force it and argue necessity. We can also not put a rotor wash on top of the only medium that holds prints." Erin straightened. The copper smell was clearer up here. Not blood. She told herself that twice without believing it more the second time. "Ozone," she said aloud. "And there's your source." The old radio tower rose past the last row of houses, a rib cage of steel against a day that was losing patience. It was supposedly dismantled, but Erin could see a squat little cab half hidden in scaff netting. Not dead, just embarrassed. When the wind shouldered through the spruce line, a low edge of hearing moan lapped at the village like a tide the ocean had forgotten how to time. "Locals call the tower dead metal," Maya said. "Our caretaker swears it." "Dead things don't hum in keys," Erin said. "We'll put ears on it." Back in the yard, they logged what would be logged. Erin had the forensic tech's bag a pinch of fine black dust from a tile crease near the ridge. Under magnification in the van, it read as carbon black married to a tackier agent. Pine resin would be her first bet. It behaved in cold the way a guilty person behaves under a direct question. Brittle until it isn't, then too sticky. "Who's missing with access to ladders?" Erin asked. "Oscar Nyberg by trade. Jens Vick, chimney sweep. Sana Eek, roofer," Maya said. "Only Nyberg and Jens have personal kits small enough to move fast and alone. Sana's crew uses scaffolds. All deny. All plausible denials. Any of them like to be watched?" Erin said it as if asking for coffee. Sometimes the dangerous answers come easier when they think you're thirsty for something else. "Most people do," Maya said, and the way she said it told Erin the inspector had lived long enough with small towns to know the appetite for attention is a major food group. They spent an hour mapping sightlines. Aaron stood on the Andersons' path and had Maya move along the street until the ridge silhouette would have been square to a viewer who didn't want to be seen watching. She marked fence posts and window frames with a carpenter's pencil, the color of resignation. In a village this tidy, everything is a ruler if you let it. By dusk, they had more questions that felt like a shape rather than a list. Erin stood with her hands in her pockets, feeling the heat decay in her gloves and wondering how many nights it takes to teach a community to look up on reflex. Someone had learned the rhythm of that reflex and hung a metronome in the wind. "We'll do this properly," she said. Thermal cameras on fixed poles, no operators to introduce their own heat. Seismic pickups on the most common eaves. Mics on the tower, low frequency capable. "I want exact windows when it talks." Maya nodded. "And the drones?" "Grounded," Aaron said. "We're not going to stir the pot and then write a report about soup. Tonight we watch the way roofs watch us." The plan folded like a ladder done right. Techs moved with the oiled silence of people who have been taught to measure twice because the first measurement is never the thing you think it is. Poles went in along the lane with narrow cones aimed at ridge lines. The seismic nodes nested under eave lips like small, patient animals. At the last light, Erin walked once more to the Andersons and laid her palm flat to the tile just below the ridge. The way you put a hand to a door you know is warm on the other side. The tar didn't speak. It rarely does before midnight. "Stake out at 23:30, she said to Maya without looking up. "We let the village pretend to sleep. We don't. And if our figure returns, then we'll learn how long it can stand still," Aaron said, "and how long the truth can." Snow began to tick against the parka fabric like grains against a drumhead. Somewhere, wood smoke got the better of caution and took a breath that would leave a stain in the morning. The tower moaned its almost voice, and the houses, prim and ordinary, pretended they weren't listening as the night came up to the eaves. By late afternoon, the roofs had the flat dim of pewter. Aaron took the Andersons' hatch again, this time with a kit that could be carried in 2 trips. A small IR thermometer, a loop, sterile swabs, cut squares of mylar for lifting particulates, and a compact Raman spectrometer that had the battered look of a tool that had saved more than one argument. She began at the ridge where the blisters told their small, blister truths. Under magnification, the bubbled tar looked like a skin that had thought better of healing. The ruptures weren't the bite marks of outgassing. No fireworks of outward spall. They cupped inward, as if something warm had sunk a thumb and the roof, embarrassed, had tried to swallow the evidence. Heel to toe. The pattern length matched a human stride shortened for caution on pitch, 32 to 34 centimeters between centers, alternating pressure points where a body uses more of the heel on approach and more of the toe on withdrawal. Aaron scraped the gentlest shaved curl from a blister's lip and sealed it, then lifted a sooty dust from the tile seam, the way you gather ash you intend to speak to later. In the van, the first swipe across the Raman screen threw up a familiar married pair. A carbon band that sat exactly where carbon should, and a secondary curve stacked with organic notes. Pine resin, not industrial pitch or epoxy, pine, the cheap and local weatherproofing that amateurs love and professionals curse. It holds in cold, then fails in ways that travel like confessions. Carbon black and rosin, Aaron said into the recorder. Not chimney soot. The particle size is wrong for exhaust. Too uniform. This was put here, not made here. She bagged a smear from the gutter lip where the patrol's body cam had caught a flash of scuff. Maya watched from the hatch rim, a silhouette squared off against a bruised sky. "Talk me through the inward ruptures again," she said. "I need to be able to say it in court without making it sound like I'm telling a ghost story." "Outward rupture is gas expanding," Aaron said. "Sun warms the membrane, volatiles try to leave. They punch outward and fling grit. Here, something placed warm pressure from above. The tar swelled up around the pressure like dough around a fingertip. When the weight moved, the bulge relaxed and inverted, skin that sank instead of popped. It only does that within a certain heat window. Midnight, give or take, when the ambient is cold but the pressure point is transient and warm relative to the membrane. Warm human. Warm enough, Aaron said, and discreet. If this were a large heated plate, a prop, you'd get sheeted swell and trough, not point load signatures. They left the Andersons and crossed to the bakery. Lena Berg's place had a squat roof that remembered summer better than the taller houses did. The oven chimney had a hood like a ship's funnel and tiles scrubbed by years of grease vapor into a true black. The ladder the patrol had left leaned there like a misremembered thought. Erin climbed alone. The air above the ridge carried the same cut metal tang as before, a flavor of thunderhead without the cloud. She squinted against it and blinked her eyes clear of superstition. Here the heat truth wrote in a different hand. A zone 8 centimeters wide straddled the ridge cap where the snow crystals had melted and refrozen into a scalloped glaze, each crescent overlapping like fish scale. It took wind to carve that shape after melting. It took exposure, the snow cover cleared or thinned, for the glaze to form. And it spoke in time. The scallops were small and repeatable, like seconds on a metronome. She touched the cap with the back of her hand. Trick learned in childhood when a cousin dared her to test a griddle without blistering. The metal was colder than the tiles. The village's breath had not warmed it today, but the glaze told a story of short-lived extraction. A body standing above this point had briefly stolen the roof's heat and handed it to the air. She shuffled to the chimney crown and found what she'd hoped and not hoped to find. 2 shallow arcs rubbed across the concrete cap 42 centimeters apart, parallel. She lined a flexible tape across them and felt the tape find their centers. A tactile click like a safe will aligning. Folding hook ladder, she said into the recorder. Hook radius 21 centimeters is a likely fit given the crown contour. A stock 19 would either not seat or would chew deeper than these shallow abrasions. This was somebody's build. Jig true. Below, Maya cupped her hands and called. Drones are grounded. Tech wants the thermal poles staggered. 2 on bakery, 2 on Anderson's, 1 on the school roof. You want the school? I want a control, Erin said. School isn't in the teens' photo stream and didn't feature in the watch chat until yesterday. If we see the same refreeze pattern on a roof with no sightings, we revisit assumptions. They made the short walk under an early dark that was full of the kind of quiet that edits words out of a conversation. The school's gable presented a dignified face to a yard of packed snow and a mural that summer children had painted, cartoon houses with square, blunt roofs, a bird, a sun, a girl taller than the tree she stood under. Erin smiled once at the unhelpful geometry and climbed. The ridge cap here was an even line of powder interrupted by nothing but wind's handwriting. No scallop glaze, no inward sunken blisters, no resin flecks. She cut a control lift anyway and trembled it in the ramen just to be dull and faithful. The readout shrugged back. Environmental dust, a common silica gypsum plant mix, nothing like the bakery or the Andersons. Control holds, she said. The pattern lives only where the village has been looking. A low hum, almost an ache, crept under the conversation of metal on glove and breath in scarf. Erin stood and let it speak through her teeth for a count of 20. The frequency found the bones at the base of her skull and tuned them without permission. She looked at the tower and didn't need to look for the wind to know when the gust would shoulder the slit in the cab and make the rig sing. In the van, she lashed a low-frequency mic to a pole and fed it into the laptop. A narrow peak stood up around 18 cycles per second, stuttering to 19 with each stronger gust. It was the kind of tone that makes an eye invent a corner in a flat wall, that makes a coat hung on a door insist on being a person for a while. 18 to 19 hertz, Erin said. Near the edge of perception. It can throw off vestibular balance, make you feel watched, make motion seem slow. She tapped the spectrogram. If you wanted witnesses to believe a figure froze for minutes, you could do worse than put this in their ears while you give them exactly 16 seconds of a person on a ridge. Maya studied the tower. Caretaker says it's dead. Dead metal in a high wind still has a throat, Erin said. But this is a tuned throat. Somebody cut that slit to shape. Somebody hung a transducer in there, or at least a diaphragm. We'll look in daylight. They went back to Lena's because the bakery held the good data. Erin swept the gutter again, and her swab came back tacky with the same resin. Under the loop, the black said yes like ink agreeing with its pen. She tested the hook scar depth on the crown, 2 millimeters at the deepest point, feathering to none, which told her about load and caution and repeat use. Non-human pattern? Maya asked. I need to know if we're chasing an illusion machine or a person machine. Both, Aaron said. The infrasound sets the stage, stretches seconds into minutes in witness memory. The roof tells me someone with weight and the ethics of a roofer, bad or good, was up here. Gill to toe, custom hook, resin for grip. They came to the ridge, stood just long enough to boil a thin skin of tar, stole heat from the cap, then lifted the hook cleanly and left without throwing a slide down the lee. That's not a puppet on a line. That's a person who has learned where attention likes to stand. She bagged one more sample from a tile corner where amber had bled and cooled into a tiny bead. Pine gives itself away when it's tired. Down on the street, a boy on a bicycle that had no business in winter took a photo of the roofline and pedaled off without looking at them. Aaron watched him go and felt the village's eyes pivot upward. Upward, upward, like flowers mistaking a lamp for the sun. At the van, she labeled the last vials and printed the preliminary report for the folder that would soon be thick enough to stop a door. We'll put ears and eyes on the tower tonight, she said. If it's making the village see slower, we'll catch its mouth open. Maya zipped her jacket against a wind that felt like a whisper before a name. You're flagging the tower. I'm flagging it as a generator of infrasound, Aaron said. Not a ghost, not a god, just the kind of machine that makes people certain of what their fear already wants to see. They stood for a moment in the seam between day and the thing that came after. The houses squared their shoulders against it. Somewhere, a door closed with the finality of a decision postponed. The tower gave one more throat-cleared moan that pressed its thumb between Aaron's eyes. Midnight, Aaron said, and the word carried as if the roofs had leaned in to hear it. Let's find out how perception gets engineered. It is easier to count roofs than motives. Aaron spent the morning counting both. Hamarvik's main street had been retrofitted with vigilance. On windowsills, binoculars and half-empty mugs, a posture of waiting disguised as chores. On phones, neighborhood chat pings that began as weather and de-iced into orders. Aaron read the last 21 days of the thread on a borrowed tablet while Maya knocked on the next door. Berg at home, retired nurse, organizer, the sort of person who leaves sandwiches on doorsteps during flu weeks, had built the list like a scaffold. Early risers, late walkers, garages with lights on after 10. She had pinned a message in the first week. Eyes up. It sounded wholesome until the reply emojis shrank and the words stood alone. Ironed flat of humor. Stand your ground. Light your eaves. Report shapes. Birgit could make a village out of fog, the neighbor said. This time she made something that looked like a village. The missing were the village's necessary roles you only notice by absence. Birgit, the check-in caller who didn't call. Oscar Nyberg, the electrician who owed everyone a favor. The man with ladder racks welded onto a van he treated like a dog he'd rescued. Badly, but with love. Lena Berg. The Saturday bread and the laughter you could hear over the mixer. Each name left a different tilt in the street. They found Lena's assistant proofing dough alone, eyes baked dry from not sleeping. She's not the type to just go, the girl said. She had flour at the corner of her mouth like someone had tried to erase the rest of the sentence. She messaged me that week. Don't look up. I thought it meant stop gawking at the roofs. But she sent it at midnight. Twice. Any fights? Any receipts that say, this is why? Maya asked. The girl shook her head. Rune asked for free buns for a tower cleanup crew that never came. Jens wanted his chimney brush repaired and said he'd swap for fresh rye. Oscar said he'd fix the oven fan after hours. We owe each other and then we go missing. That's the stupid kind, isn't it? Most kinds are, Aaron said gently. They moved on. People who live with snow know how to keep their faces from chapping. The same expression keeps them from testifying beyond what they'll have to repeat. A few who liked the camera during festivals didn't mind it now either. Two teenagers with frost-pink noses leaned on their bikes and told the story the way teens recite an alibi, with truth and swagger wrestling for the same space. Yeah, we posted, one said, flinging his hair out of his eyes as if that would clear the guilt too. Silhouette shots get likes. It's like a challenge. Don't be mad. We're not mad, Maya said. We're interested. She had her pen out but didn't write, the trick you learn to make the other person fill the silence with usable edges. Where do you stand when you shoot? Here. Or there. He pointed. Angles that crossed the street and found the same two gables again and again. The Andersons, the bakery, Rune's cottage far down the lane. You don't post the school, Aaron noted. Boring shape, the boy said, and looked to his friend for confirmation. Also, no one cares if a school has a ghost. Houses are better. Who told you to stop posting? No one. The chat got weird. People started counting minutes like a contest. Counting minutes, Maya repeated. How many minutes do the silhouettes stand? 5? 10? It feels long, he said defensively. You try looking at a roof in the cold and counting. It stretches. Aaron let the infrasound from the tower hum in the gap between his answer and her next question, a record skipping just below hearing. The air vibrated the cartilage of her nose and made the world slightly larger than the world. Do you know the word pareidolia? She asked, kind. He did not. It means your brain likes to make faces out of everything. Infrasound makes time do that too, stretching what you think you saw. You saw something, but how long did it stand? That's the part someone helped you change. They interviewed access people, those who could put weight on roofs without being foolish. Sana Eek ran a crew of 3 with square shoulders and cheerless competence. She had a foreman's pencil behind her ear and the quiet contempt of a professional for amateurs with enthusiasm. We scaffold, Sana said, showing Aaron the catalog, then her calloused hands. Anchors rated, lines tied, the work you do when you want to go home with as many bones as you came with. We do not hook ladder in winter without fall arrest. We do not. That's... She searched for a Swedish word that would be polite in front of the inspector. She gave up and said in English, Stupid death. Hooks? Aaron asked. In the yard, Sana said. She dragged a crate with metal mouths in it. Aaron measured a standard hook with her tape. 19 centimeters throat radius. You see, Sana said, eager now that the math let her disdain look like science. Anything else is a custom. We don't make customs for cowboys. Jens Vick, the chimney sweep, had a face chapped red and eyes that seemed to blink against smoke that wasn't there. His office was a shed that smelled of ash and pine from different centuries. Hooks on his wall. Stock, 19. Brush heads like dark flowers. A map under a magnet that was a bottle opener. You been on a roof at midnight? Maya asked. You embarrass me with questions that belong to 20 years ago, Jens said, half a smile. Now I keep civil hours. Clients like that. Kids take the silly hour work. I complain. They ignore me. Circle of life. Who are your kids? Aaron asked. I don't employ. I complain about kids I don't pay, like every old man, Jens said, and the smile died. Yes, I saw silhouettes. Yes, I looked up. Yes, I took a picture. No, I didn't post it. It felt like collaboration. Collaboration with what? With being seen, he said quietly, and it was the first time Aaron liked him. Oscar's workshop was locked and the van was gone. The padlock had that bright look new brass has when it hasn't learned about rain yet. Maya made a call, got a key, and they let themselves into a space that looked like a man had walked out for a minute and then kept walking all week. On the bench, a cheap wood lathe with a circular jig clamped onto its bed. Aaron measured the jig's inside curve. 21 centimeters on the tape. Not a scrounged dimension, a chosen one. Custom hook radius, she said. The jig had resin smears that had collected dust like a fur. There were rags stiff with pine, a habit from men taught by grandfathers. A ledger with addresses and times in a careful hand. Each line had a roof and a clock. 002, 017, 041. Aaron traced the list with a gloved finger and felt the little electric prick that comes with something that fits too well, too soon. He plotted line of sight, she said. Not just access, visibility. What was Oscar's cause? Maya asked the air. He's generous and he's missing. That's 2 poles in the same field. I don't see the fence yet. Some people like to be seen doing something that looks like punishment, Aaron said. Some people like to punish while being seen. We're going to find out which species this is. They took coffee in the municipal kitchenette because the human body insists on small indulgences even when roofs are rehearsing murder. Rune Leightonin, caretaker, the man with the tower keys, joined them uninvited and without invitation needed. He had fingers notched by wire work and a caretaker's ability to appear with a wrench exactly when a pipe hissed but never sooner. "You keep asking about my dead metal," Rune said. He poured coffee with a careful hand that shook only once he'd set the pot down. "It is dead. The kids made it moan with wind. I told the council it upsets the dogs. No one listens until dogs complain." "Keys, Rune," Maya said, not unkind. "We'll look. You'll find drafts and a family of spiders," Rune said. "You'll write a report about drafts." "You like being the man with keys," Aaron said mildly. "It makes people ask you to unlock things. That's a particular pleasure. I have it too." Rune looked at her as if he'd been offered a mirror and didn't like who it showed. "I keep the place safe," he said. "Kids climb. Men drink and think heights are a good idea. I hide the ladder. I close the hatches." "You also made stencils," Aaron said, laying out the photos from the tower cab they'd taken at dawn. "Plywood shelf, house number cutouts, chalk angles." Rune didn't look at them, which was as good as looking. "Dead metal," he repeated, as if the words were a charm. "You know how old things sing in wind." "They do," Aaron said. "They don't choose a key without help." When they got back to the street, the day had pulled its color down to a narrow strip of tarnish in the west. Curtains had reasons not to twitch. Heads had reasons to be level. Aaron stood at the bakery's corner and watched the empty ridge of the Andersons' house for a full minute. In that minute, 5 curtains remembered they had reasons. "Maya," she said without turning her head. "How many humans can you hold in a stare before one of them has to move?" "Depends on the humans. Depends on who thinks the stare means ownership," Maya said. "Angles," Aaron said. "We're mapping not just the roofs but the places where eyes rest. Whoever is doing this understands where to stand to be caught and how to make a crowd count too slowly." "We'll need schedules," Maya said. "Workers, insomniacs, dog walkers, teens, crowd attention cycles, where the watchers stand when they think they're invisible." Aaron pointed at the pencil marks she'd made yesterday on fence rails and window frames, the quiet rulers of a tidy town. "We already started," she said. "Tonight, we don't just watch the ridge. We watch the watchers. If someone is staging silhouettes, they're performing for the habit of looking. We'll sit where the habit sits." The tower hummed, a throat clearing before a speech. The houses pretended they were not an audience. The snow at the edges of the street kept its perfect edge like a freshly cut sheet of paper you could bleed on if you weren't careful. Aaron lifted her eyes to the eaves and felt, in the hollows of her ears, the way a village can build a stage out of attention and call what steps onto it a ghost. They set the village like a stage and took their seats in the orchestra pit. By 23:30, the thermal poles were live. Their narrow cones aimed so precisely that a sparrow's landing would have written itself as a footnote. Seismic nodes snuggled under eaves in little foam cradles, labels facing out as if that would help them hear better. The low-frequency microphones pointed at the tower's slit like reporters at a sullen minister. Cables ran under snow in tidy trenches that would be footprints by morning if anyone cared to read them. Aaron chose the bakery roof as the fulcrum. The oven was off. The building exhaled at a predictable rate, a small heat bloom in a cold field, perfect for comparison. Maya took a parked patrol car as blind and a thermos that steamed like a threat. The street, by consensus, pretended to sleep and succeeded only at the pretense. "Logging," the tech said into the shared channel. "Thermal cams A through D, seismics on bakery, Andersons, Runes. LF mic at the mouth. All clocks sync to GPS. No operator motion after 23:45. "Copy," Maya said. "Street teams, eyes down unless instructed. No headlamps unless safety requires." Aaron took the attic ladder across from Lena's and climbed into a house that smelled of wool and glass cleaner. From there, A small roof window let her see the bakery ridge without seeing her own reflection. She set the camera for long exposures and made a deal with her eyelids. At 40 seconds, the tower cleared its throat at 19 hertz. The spectrogram wrote a thin blade that quivered to 18 as the gust slacked, then back again as if the wind were indecisive about who it wanted to be tonight. The street's snow skins took the vibration and returned it to bone. Erin felt the tiny pressure wave find the bridge of her nose and press there gently, insistently, as a thumb might. "Mike hears it," the text said. "LF peak 18.7, rising. Silence on the radios unless you have blood or fire," Maya said, soft and absolute. 1 minute and 50 seconds. In the long exposure, the bakery ridge was a solid, patient line. The thermal feed showed a familiar spill of heat pooling just below the cap, the way warmth squats where architecture makes it. Erin looked from screen to real roof and back again and decided not to blink until the inevitable made her. 1 minute and 59 seconds. The seismic node under the bakery eaves coughed a crisp, unmistakable impulse. Metal kissing stone with intent. The hook had set. A split second later, a smaller, softer signature walked along the eave as weight transferred to the rung. The thermal image hiccuped, no flare, no white-hot person shape on a roof like in movies. Instead, a cool void formed atop the cap, a thin blue ribbon where red should pool. Wind shear, Erin thought, where body and ladder disrupted the lazy convection that makes roofs glow. The ridge's heat didn't vanish. It was carved, lifted into the air by a standing thing that stole the boundary layer and made the camera see absence as presence. "Loading bakery ridge," the tech whispered despite the rule. "Thermal shows negative anomaly, not positive." "Mark it," Erin said. "Keep the chatter off. We're timing." Across the lane, a curtain betrayed a watcher. Then another. The village did what villages do under a rumor of danger. It calculated whether it could bear witness without being caught bearing it. A man stepped outside with a phone held at stomach height. The tower hummed a hair louder, and in the humming, time found a new slope to run down. From 1 minute and 59 seconds to 2 minutes and 15 seconds, the seismic trace wrote the particular cursive that bodies write when they think they're standing still. Microadaptations 0.2 seconds apart, a sway cycle, the heel-to-toe tick of a calf muscle obeying its god. 16 seconds of roof load. Erin counted them with the same part of her brain she used to count breaths in anxiety attacks. A street-level whispers thickened. 5 minutes? Someone breathed. Not on the radio, but through an open window that served as conduit for nonsense. "It's been 5 minutes already." "Witnesses reporting long duration," Maya said into Erin's ear, not the net. "You getting it?" "I'm getting 16 seconds, Erin said. "Mark hook lift when it comes." 3 minutes and 12 seconds. The seismic signature snapped its tidy line like a taut thread cut with teeth. A second crisp impulse up on the crown. Metal departed stone. The small scratches under the eave registered a swing, a hanging weight sweeping an arc. On the thermal feed, the cool void closed like a mouth. "Hook lift," the text said. "Time stamped." "Confirm arc," Erin said. She was already moving. In the attic, she sealed the long exposure frame and slid between rafters to a second window that chased the downhill slope beyond the bakery ridge, where a prudent climber would have stepped backward into safety and blackness. She saw nothing on the far face but the discipline of old snow. The tower sang again, and the village's pupils dilated in unison. On the gutter, the camera caught it. A scuffed arc, crescent-shaped, chalked in frost and resin. A hoofprint belonging to a machine. Erin photographed the scar as if it might heal from embarrassment and disappear. In the loop, a few grains of black dust glittered like an apology. After, on her glove tip, the same resin tack like old sugar. "Arc confirmed," she said to Maya. "Hook swing on the lift. Resin present." Maya's voice came back with the quiet that precedes a crowd. "Street witnesses," she said, and Erin could hear the capital letters. 3 independents say the figure didn't move for 5 minutes. 1 says 10. "Tell them thank you," Erin said. "Write it down word for word. And then write down 16 next to it in pencil you can't erase." On the Andersons' ridge, nothing. On Rune's cottage, Nothing yet but the sense of attention beating before an actor's entrance. The LF mic laid a new blade down the screen, this time synchronized to the brief thermal void on the bakery and, a minute later, to an entirely empty roof on the school that no one was watching because no one ever watches the places that don't give them a story. LF windows are coincident with sightings, the tech reported softly. We're logging hum start at 40 seconds, crest at 1 minute and 58 seconds, decay by 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Say it in the memo later with pretty pictures, Maya said. For now, don't move. The boy with the bicycle had returned, older by an hour and by the choice to become a historian. He raised his phone and pulled time like taffy across the lens. Aaron imagined the video already. A black ridge, a slow breath on the track, a comment section willing to invent minutes the way a village invents a ghost. She left the attic only when the air had the flat echo of a show ending. On the bakery roof, she walked the lines between her markers from earlier days and found that scuffed crescent again, this time without the camera lens between them. The arc rose across the gutter's paint like a question mark that had been taught manners. She swabbed it. The swab tried to keep her. Resin, pine, carbon black. 2 crisp impulses, she said to the recorder. Because nothing is true in police work until you say it twice into something with a battery. 1 minute and 59 seconds hook set. 3 minutes and 12 seconds hook lift. Total roof load 16 seconds with microsway signatures every 9. Thermal anomaly is negative, the void of wind-sheared warmth, not a positive human plume. Street-level testimony reports 5 to 10 minutes of stillness. Infrasound at 18-19 Hz present and synchronized with sighting window. Maya joined her, breath clouding, boots finding the same low, wide stance roof workers share because gravity is so punctual. She looked at the gutter the way you look at a bruise on a friend's throat and decide whether to ask the question you're afraid of the answer to. You think someone's manufacturing long sightings, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a line they would later have to read in court. I think they're stacking illusions, Aaron said. Infrasound to slow the watcher's seconds. Angle discipline to keep the silhouette true. 16 seconds of real weight to give the story bone. A clean lift and a swing that leaves a mark you can go home and show your doubt and tell it to sit. Who? Someone who knows how roofs talk and how crowds listen, Aaron said. Someone with a custom hook and a ledger of times. Someone who likes to be believed. The tower's hum shifted key and then sighed out. Curtains unpinched themselves. Dogs shook as if rain had ended. Across the lane, a woman lowered her phone and discovered her hands hurt from holding them in the cold. Maya looked at the village lowering its shoulders and at the instruments still writing their thin truths onto disc. We can prove the minutes are a lie, she said. We can show the hook, the resin, the swing. We can show the village its own echo, Aaron said. She looked at the ridge and imagined a person learning to become a shadow 1 measured second at a time. Tomorrow we take the tower's mouth apart. Tonight we take the story apart, piece by piece. A gust shouldered through the spruces and the dead metal spoke one last almost word. The kind that makes a watcher's peripheral vision insist a figure just moved when it never did. Aaron laid a hand on the ridge cap, cold, now obedient, and thought about how long a person could stand in their neighbor's certainty before gravity asked for payment. Instruments recorded 16 seconds of load. Witnesses swore to minutes. The tower's hum matched the sighting windows. The gutter wore a scuffed crescent where a hook had swung. Someone wasn't just climbing roofs, they were weaponizing attention. Tomorrow, the tower. Tonight, the village would sleep under the idea that it had seen a ghost, and Aaron would go to bed with the proof that it had seen a person stretched thinner than truth. Morning brought a sky the color of old pewter and a wind that filed edges off sentences. Aaron liked mornings like this. They tested whether what you thought you'd learned at midnight could stand up without the stage lights. She set up on a workbench in the municipal garage with a roll of butcher paper, a carpenter's pencil, and evidence bags arranged like a small army. The blisters from the Andersons' roof, the resin fleck swabs from the bakery gutter, the abrasion measurements off the chimney crowns, the seismic traces printed on thermal paper that still wanted to curl back into secrets. She sketched a roof crown in profile, the shallow arc of the ridge tile, the square mouth of a chimney cap, the texture lines of tar. Then she drew the thing that fit against it, the mouth of a roof hook. "Stock hooks?" she said to Maya, who had commandeered a chair and the coffee supply. "Come off the shelf at a 19-centimeter throat radius. They're meant for common crowns, steep pitches that want to bite, and people who think one size fits as long as you swear before you climb. But our arcs," she tapped the measurements, "are 42 centimeters apart. That's foot-piece spacing from a folding hook ladder, not a single hook perch. And the crown abrasions show shallow, even rubs. A 19-centimeter throat would nip here and here." She marked 2 points on the chalked crown. "It would chew. We saw feathering. That means the hook sat clean and lifted clean." "How big?" Maya asked, because in police work, how big is another way of asking how certain. 21 centimeters, Erin said. She drew a circle jig, a perfect arc that matched the abrasions cord when she laid the protractor to it. You don't get 21 by accident from a stock bend. You get it by jig. They tested the hypothesis with metal because paper is a coward under cross. Sana Eek sent over a standard folding hook ladder, cold steel laid on colder tile in the schoolyard where no one could accuse them of ruin. Erin set the 19-centimeter hook on a mock crown they'd built from spare cap tiles and concrete pebbled to mimic age. The hook bit narrow and hard, a dog bred to clamp, not sit. She chalked the contact, high-pressure ovals, not the gentle crescents they had found in the field. "Not our teeth marks," she said. Jens Vik arrived when summoned, breath blooming out of his scarf like he was exhaling a small gray animal. He stood off a little, the way men who've spent years on roofs give the ground a respectful distance. Erin put the stock ladder in his hands. "Show me how you'd set it on a crown like that," she said. Jens did it right. He always had. Hook up, test, heel back to keep the bite engaged, foot down to check the first rung before trusting the second. The sound of it, the faint grind of metal on gritty concrete, was familiar and not quite right. The noise in their field recordings had been a little cleaner, a tad more seated. "This will mark deep," Jens said, palms on the bar. "You'd see bright scratches. You saw feather. So not this." He looked past Erin at the butcher paper, at her 21-centimeter sketch. Something like admiration crossed his face, then pulled a scarf back over it. "You know your hooks. I know what roofs admit," Erin said. "Who owns a lathe in this village?" "Half the old men do," Jens said dryly. "The other half borrow. They went to Oscar Nyberg's shed because sometimes you let an inference lead you by the hand and see if it takes you somewhere criminal." The lock yielded to the key Maya had had all night. The brass nicked now like it had learned something honest. The inside was comfortably dishonest. A wood lathe crouched on the bench, old and beloved and filthier than any surgeon would accept. To its bed was clamped a circle jig cut from plywood, edges burnished by repetition. Erin laid her tape on the inner curve, 21 centimeters, unshy. Next to it, a wedge-shaped stop block with pencil marks at 42 centimeters intervals, rung spacing, human leg logic branded into wood. Resin-rigid rags lay like discarded skins. The air had that sweet-sour pine note that turns hard in winter and sticky in heat. "Oscar," Maya said softly, in the way one speaks to a presence that refuses to be a person yet. "You complicated man." Erin turned the jig over. Along the underside, he traced dimensions in carpentry shorthand, R21, step 42, and below, a small line in pencil dense enough to look like ink. Anderson's Lena, Rune. Sight lines, not just access. On the shelf above the bench, a ledger. No cash tallies. No invoices. A list in a careful hand. The same neatness that makes men good at wiring houses and bad at leaving other people's corners unstraightened. Address, date, clock time. Sometimes 2 times. Once, 3. 003. 017. 041. He logged line-of-sight windows, Erin said. Not working times. Performance times. "And now he's gone," Maya said. There was something in her voice like frost and pity arguing. "Do we have his van?" Plate reads on the first week of sightings put it near the tower access road at midnight and a little after, Erin said, flicking through the municipality's LPR hits on her tablet. The columns of numbers made their own hum. Then nothing. The last ping is 7 nights ago. Jens stood by the door like a man who has stepped on a floorboard he isn't sure will hold. He looked at the jig, then at his own hands as if they might betray him without warning. You teach yourself to bend a hook like that because you want a better bite, he said. Or because you want a quiet one. He winced as though saying it made his mouth taste of old pennies. My hooks are stock. 19. You've seen them. I didn't. This isn't mine. We'll take them anyway, Maya said, apologetic and ruthless in the same breath. Eliminate the obvious. Stock or not, I'll sign them out for you, Jens said. Better than you taking them. You put them back ridge down or they warp. Aaron angled him a look. Who did you teach to climb? Jens took a long time to answer. You don't teach climbing, he said. You fail to stop girls and boys with quick hands when they decide it looks easy. Sometimes you tell them where to put their feet so they don't die on your watch. Sometimes they think not dying means you approved. The world writes your signature on things you only tried to keep from killing someone. Oscar, Maya pressed. Jens's face closed with a laborer's mercy, the kind that refuses to slander someone's bones before they're found. Oscar liked tools, he said. He liked neatness. He liked making things to fit other things. He liked being seen making them. He didn't like being called a show-off. He will have called it craft. They logged the jig, the resin rags, the ledger. The last entry was 3 nights ago. Rune's address at the bottom of the page like a punchline in bad taste. Aaron traced the pencil grooves with a gloved finger and felt how hard he'd pressed. Outside, the village was in that late morning lull where you can hear a glove slap against the sleeve and name the material. Snow squeaked in the small, brittle register that tells you nothing will melt today unless you help it. Aaron looked up at the tower and imagined the slit humming at 19 hertz over a man like Oscar standing in knowledge of his own correctness while a village adjusted its clocks to flatter him. They went to Rune's cottage. It sat prim, hat of snow straight, chimney quiet. The eaves had been wiped recently. Aaron didn't need to touch the gutter to know someone had taken a cloth to it. People think they're erasing crime when all they're erasing is kindness from the roof to tell the truth cleanly. Rune, Maya said when he opened the door, we'll be in and out. You've been in and out already, Rune said, but he stepped aside. He had learned the posture of a man who will be arrested and wants the house to remember him as polite. In the back room, a cupboard with a padlock tried to look like a broom closet. Rune fished a key from the pocket watch he was pretending not to wear and handed it over. Inside, coils of black nylon line, a roll of stencil plastic, a jar of resin with a stick in it frozen mid-stir, a folded tarp that had kept something from the weather without keeping the weather from the smell. On the inner door panel, chalk angles drawn from tower to houses. Sight lines, like Oscar's ledger, but broader. A director's notes rather than an actor's. You said dead metal, Aaron told him without heat. You meant a stage. Rune looked at the chalk as if it had betrayed him. Kids, he said. They climb. Men drink. Someone has to keep a village safe in the dark. By putting people on roofs? Maya asked. By teaching them what happens if you don't listen, Rune said. And there it was, the brisk little righteousness that allows harm to do its sums. Aaron took the jar lid and sealed the resin. Whose handwriting on the angles? Mine, he said. You think I can't draw lines? I think you can, Aaron said. I think Oscar can too. He drew times. You drew lines. Between you is a ladder. They left him with his politeness and his keys and the small space where a conscience might once have lived. Outside, the wind pulled a string across the slit in the tower and made it say ah like a reluctant child at a doctor's. Back at the garage, Aaron drafted the memo that would become part of the case. Because nothing exists in police work until it's described by an adult in a voice a judge can stand. She laid the photos, crown abrasions with feathered edges, the chalked contact pattern of a 19-centimeter hook biting too hard, the 21-centimeter jig they'd pulled off Oscar's lathe, the ledger entries aligning with the times the tower liked to sing. Hook geometry, she wrote, reconstructed probable tool profile, folding roof hook ladder with custom throat radius R equals 21 cm, rung spacing 42 centimeters, Footrail width compatible with 195 to 205 millimeters. Contact wear on chimney crowns indicates seating consistent with R equals 21 cm. Stock R equals 19 cm would have produced deeper, narrower scratches absent in situ. Resin and carbon black present on gutter scuffs and tile seems consistent with amateur weatherproofing. Likely used intentionally on hook contact zones for grip and on tile to prepare a consistent friction surface. She paused, flexed the cramp out of her writing hand, and looked at the absence where motive should be. "What does he get?" Maya said, reading it over her shoulder. "Oscar. He builds the hook that fits, he times the windows, he visits the tower road. And then he vanishes." "Why?" Aaron put the pencil down and let the question sit. It didn't ripen. It just stayed cold. "Some people like the clean mathematics of risk," she said at last. "Some like the stage. Some like the feeling of being above a village that's pretending not to watch. Some want to punish. Some want to be punished. He might be any of those. He might be both. We don't have him to ask," Maya said. "Not yet," Aaron said, and the not yet tasted like frost. They boxed the jig. They logged the ledger. They bagged the resin. They scheduled a return to the tower with a pry bar and a camera and a willingness to be deaf the rest of the day. Outside, the roofs did what roofs do when humans turn them into altars. They waited for the next right as if the last one hadn't been enough. The tool shape fit. A folding hook ladder with a custom 21 centimeters throat and 42 centimeters rung cadence. Oscar's jig said so. The roofs agreed. Jens's and Sana's stock gear didn't match the scars. Oscar's van had ghosted near the tower the first week. His ledger mapped sightlines like showtimes. It made him the craftsman of the climb. It didn't tell Aaron why, and he was still missing. Burgett Home's flat had the cleanliness of a life that was always ready for someone else to drop by. The doormat asked visitors to wipe their feet. The shoe rack knew each pair by name. A mug on the counter had been rinsed and set upside down to dry. A little halo of water around its rim now frozen into a pale ring of scale. The clock over the bookshelf had stopped at 12:03. Not because it was broken, but because someone, Maya guessed Burgett herself, had taken the battery out to quiet a tick that turned midnight into a metronome. "Front's clear," Maya said, finishing a protective sweep. No disturbance since the initial welfare check. Aaron drifted toward the best-lit room the way a moth drifts with a purpose. The bay window faced the street at just the right height to make you a participant in other people's evenings without forcing you to change your own. On the sill, 2 rubber feet shadows on the paint where the sun had never quite reached. Tripod marks, faded circles, a pair. She crouched, pressed a fingertip to the clean round ghosts, and felt the slight grit where camera legs had fretted varnish. "Tripod used often," she said. She didn't handhold her surveillance. She curated it. Maya opened a narrow cupboard and found birch boxes labeled in a tidy hand. Birds, spring, roofs. She picked up roofs like a thing that might crack if you announced its name too loudly. Inside, telephoto prints in neat stacks, not glossy but matte, the way archivists choose paper that won't exaggerate a color into a lie. Each 10 by 15 had a penciled note in the lower margin. Addresses, dates, and often small, irritated annotations. Aaron took the top 4 and laid them like a proof. Anderson's Ridge, Bakery Cap, Rune's Cottage, a 4th house not on their list, Burgett's own. Each photograph centered a roofline where a human shape might be if you were the kind of person who wanted to catch such shapes like butterflies and push a pin through their thorax. Most frames had no figure at all. A few had something that could be a person or a coat hung on a chimney's angle. In the margin, Burgett had written, "Stairs back," sometimes twice, sometimes underlined as if the ink could make the stair bounce. "She annotated reciprocity," Aaron murmured. "Not I see you, but you see me seeing you." The loop. Maya turned a page in the chat logs on her tablet, the neighborhood thread Burgett had chaired. The first week, eyes up tonight, icy patches on the bend near the Andersons. The third, lights on eaves at 2350. Count heads, report shapes, asterisk asterisk by the 5th. If they won't come down, make them. Replies shed emojis like a snake sheds skin. The tone hardened into an alloy of certainty and boredom. People invented terms. Roll call at midnight. Standing watch, that sounded like safety and functioned like theater. She made a militia, Maya said. Polite fonts. Domestic staging. But the verbs shifted. They always do, Aaron said. Surveillance begins as protection and ends as a dare. On Birgit's desk, under a pad of shopping lists and a clipped recipe for a cardamom braid, sat a spiral notebook. The cover bore a photograph of a lighthouse too clean to have saved anyone. Inside, stick figures sketched onto rooftops, each drawing labeled with a surname. Some names had a neat X through them. Under Lena, a small strip of tape held down a pressed sprig of pine. The resin had bled, leaving a faint amber thumbprint on the paper's edge. Aaron lifted the sprig with tweezers, memory of the rooftop sent rising like a quiet accusation. She pressed pine under Lena, as if the resin proved, what? Guilt? A clue she thought only she could understand. Maya scanned the columns. Home crossed out names after sightings, she said. A ledger of vindication. Proof that the village is what she thought it was. They found more prints. Oscar's van parked in different places, its ladder racks sketched over in pencil, arrows pointing up, times circled. Jens's chimney brush leaned against a fence at dusk, captioned wrong hour. The syntax of suspicion. Birgit had sharpened ordinary into evidence. Weird thing, Maya said, and her voice softened in spite of the room. Birgit used to do midnight checks during flu outbreaks. She called widowers to remind them tea was not dinner. She organized reflective tape on strollers. She wasn't mean. She became mean on paper first. That's where it gets practiced, Aaron said. She turned another page and found a photograph of the old radio tower in winter sun, crisp and brittle. Birgit had traced sightlines in red pencil from its cab to roof lines, right over the image, measuring with a ruler like a student relearning geometry. She had written, "Angles prove it." In the hallway, the neighbor, the one who had let them in with a key he pretended not to keep, hovered with a plastic container of cinnamon rolls like a passport. He had eyes that preferred important news even if it hurt. She said, he offered. She said, if they won't come down, make them. One night she said that. She said it with a laugh like she wanted us to laugh too. But no one laughed. You know when someone has gone a little past the curb. Maya set the box on the table and thanked him. Aaron asked if Birgit had argued with anyone recently. The neighbor narrated the usual winter frictions. Snow dumped across property lines, kids doing wheelies on bikes at stupid hours, the baker's van blocking the bend when deliveries came. Small grievances rewritten as policy when the sun goes away too long. Aaron returned to the window and measured the tripod shadow circles, 49 centimeters center to center, the exact spread of a mid-range photo tripod's legs at a height that would clear a sill. She looked down the street as Birgit would have, camera steady, tea cooling. From here, the Andersons' ridge sat square and flat, a stage if you wanted it. The bakery's cap cut a dark square against the paler morning. Obedient. Rune's cottage, farther down, was just manageable with a long lens and the patience to wait for a gust to make the flag on his corner twitch like a person's sleeve. What was she doing in the minute between 0:03 and 0:07? Aaron said to the room. While her neighbors fetched ladders and changed the story into proof, she was counting, cross-referencing, becoming the audience she wanted to be. Maya bent to the floor and pressed her palm to a smear near the skirting board where snowmelt had once licked in under the frame. I don't want to believe that this led to people dragged onto roofs, she said quietly. But the notebook plus the chat plus the pressed pine. She went from watcher to inciter. And she's gone. Aaron placed the sprig back in its taped bracket as if the paper could feel the absence. The resin's sweet-sour wake laced her throat. Pine had been everywhere in this case like a cheap perfume on an expensive coat. Too much, chosen because it was at hand, applied until it confessed. They photographed the tripod feet shadows, the telephotos, the notebook pages with their childish roofs and adult consequences. Evidence bags flourished like sterile flowers. When they were done, the room looked the same to someone who loved Birgit. It looked stripped to someone who loved truth. In the stairwell, a child's drawing hung from a clip. A house, a ladder, a stick figure on a roof, another on the ground lifting a hand. Someone had written hello in shaky letters between them. Maya and Aaron stood there too long for people who had work to do, reading a greeting that felt like a command. Rune asked for buns for a tower cleanup crew that never came, Maya said, as if the detail had been waiting for a suitable silence to enter. Jens swapped favors. Oscar checked lines of sight. Birgit measured angles. Lena warned, "Don't look up. These are not discrete lines. These are threads on the same spool." Aaron nodded. "A feedback spiral," she said. "The village watches, the watcher curates, the curated watching becomes an event. The event demands an answer on higher ground. Someone obliges. Then someone uses that stage to harm." Maya exhaled, the sound of a conclusion polishing itself. "We tell the prosecutor." Birgit's window was the rehearsal room. The tower was the mouth. The rooftops were the stage. And in between, the resin trail. Aaron looked once more through the window with its two neat circles. The street performed ordinary life badly, like actors still in rehearsal clothing. Somewhere a door closed with care. Somewhere the tower made the faintest vowel. "Bag the notebook," she said. "Photograph the pressed pine in situ and again on a gray card. Then we go to the tower and ask its mouth what it told people to believe." What began as vigilance had grown angles and a script. Tripod feet on a sill, telephoto's caption stares back, a notebook of stick figures crossed out, a pressed sprig of pine under Lena. Birgit's curation turned watching into accusation. The village built a stage from attention. Someone stepped onto it and made harm look like proof. The spiral was set. Now the tower's hum would tell them how loud the lie had become. The access road to the old radio tower ran along a thin stand of spruce that hummed in any wind, which made them a perfect alibi. Aaron and Maya hiked it in boots that had learned to be careful on rutted ice, with a pry bar and a camera and the kind of permission that is signed after the fact when the facts are good enough. The tower stood over the village, not like a guardian, but like an instrument someone had forgotten to case. Rune's padlock was on the lower hatch. It was new brass against old steel, a shout of virtue pinned to a throat. Maya photographed, then levered. The shackle surrendered with a noise that would be handsome in a courtroom. Inside the base, a ladder raked up into the cab through stale air that smelled of rust and winter breath. Aaron swung in and climbed, counting rungs, cataloging each bolt head by the way it had fretted paint into fine red flour. The cab was a plywood room inside steel bones, the way a throat makes a voice box around a windpipe. Whoever had rebuilt it had done it with care and impatience. A salvaged car alternator wore a wind vane cocked toward the slit like a hungry ear. A car battery squatted in a plastic milk crate, leads crimped with the practiced arrogance of someone who thinks electrical tape is a personality trait. Between them, a breadboard with a cheap amplifier, wires disciplined with zip ties and then allowed to drape, the way neat men become lazy when the song plays. Aaron crouched and let the low-frequency microphone listen inside the throat. Even silent, the room had a shape your bones recognized. The slit cut into the steel skin of the cab was not incidental. It was a measured mouth. She laid a ruler along it, 73 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, with edges rolled inward to make a shallow horn. The gust that shouldered through the spruces found the mouth and said ahs and ohs at 18 to 19 cycles per second, while the alternator's belt twitched and threw a staccato high-frequency whine that rode like harmonics on the bigger note. "What do you hear?" Maya asked from the hatch, her voice an intrusion and a mercy. "A tuned vowel," Aaron said. "Somebody cut this slit in this length to make that frequency. The alternator's only job is to keep the amp on when the wind slacks. The infrasound's mostly the wind across the horn. But," she tapped the diaphragm at the mouth of the breadboard amp, "a beefy transducer, the kind camp counselors use to make picnic tables vibrate to bad music. This will carry the tone when there's no gust, keep the village's head full when the wind takes a breath." On a shelf made of 2x4s lay a small, domestic chaos, a roll of stencil plastic cut into neat rectangles, a stack of house number cutouts in a font the municipality used for mailboxes, chalk lines on the plywood with angles from tower to addresses noted like artillery math, and an open jar where resin had cooled with a skin like a blister popped at its center. Next to that, a coil of black nylon line, the kind roofers and pranksters both love because it pretends to be innocent until your palms are burning with it. Erin photographed the stencils, the angles, the resin. She touched the nylon and watched dust print on her glove in fine gray stars. "You could pop up a cutout silhouette from here," she said. A sheet of board painted black, hung on a line, raised for the length of a gust, then hauled down. The chalk angles give the sightlines. The stencils give you which roof to fake tonight. Maya nodded at the cool logic. But the seismics and thermal say there was real weight. "Exactly," Erin said. "This is backup or bait. Or it's a thing you tell yourself you built to keep kids out, when what you are really building is a way to make a village believe its fear for longer." She bagged the resin jar after lifting a sample with a wooden spatula, the amber string stretching with a slow reluctance and snapping with a sigh. The fingerprints on the battery case gleamed in powder as obvious as confession. Back in the van, the AFIS ping would tell them exactly what they already knew, but Erin dusted anyway. Ridges. Loops ending ridges. The little prairie of skin geography Rune carried on his right hand appeared on plastic with a familiarity that made her teeth feel cold. "Rune Leighton in," Maya said, when they were back on the ground and the mobile printer spit out the match. "He owns the battery with his hands. He'll say he set it up to make the tower sound haunted," Erin said. "He'll say kids were climbing, and he wanted to scare them off. He'll say the alternator was to keep the light on in the cab for safety and the amp was for calibration and the slit just happened to sing. He'll say things that would be true in a different arrangement." Outside, the wind leaned into the mouth and the mouth answered with the thin pressure that gets into your eyes and makes the air a presence. Erin felt the sensation like hands on her temples. Not cruel, just insistent. She pictured a crowd on a street below, pupils dilated under a sky not quite dark, seconds stretching like gum. You could put anything in that second. A human could stand for 16 and be remembered for 500. She turned to the far window of the cab and sighted through it with Rune's chalk angles in mind. The line touched the Andersons' gable, the bakery's cap, Rune's own cottage ridge. Between, telephone wires drew staffs for the tower's note to write on. As if to demonstrate, a stronger gust cut the slit and the infrasound's pressure rose enough to make her inner ear complain. Erin swallowed and felt the bone respond. Reflexes misled in a place engineers insist has nothing to do with souls. She looked down and watched the village's roofs look back. In the corner of the cab, under the shelf with the stencils, lay a folded tarp. Erin pulled it free and it shook out a dust that had faith in nylon. Under it, a folding hook ladder. Not stock. Someone had polished the hook mouths with emery cloth to a gleam the way vanity polishes a lie. Erin set her tape on the throat in a practiced arc. The number lay there like a card placed face up. 21 centimeters. Rungs? 42 centimeters on the nose, center to center. Resin had been smeared on the bar where it nested on a crown, and grit had made a brown sugar of it, crusted but even. "You keep a ladder where you keep an infrasound generator," Maya said. "Caretaker who doesn't want kids climbing." "Caretaker who climbs," Erin corrected. She laid the hook across a spare ridge cap someone had hauled up here to practice seating. The contact rub feathered exactly the way it had on Lena's chimney crown. She didn't smile because happiness is a taboo in the presence of proof, but something inside her relaxed into the shape of math. "And yet," Maya said, "because there is always an and yet. You could string a silhouette too, that nylon line, those stencils, the angles. Nothing stops you from raising a cutout when there's wind and letting the village clap." "You could," Erin said, "but the roofs insist someone was there. The seismic is human. The microsway is human. The inward tar ruptures are heat pulled by a body. The gutter scuff is a swinging mass on a lift. If there were a puppet, it was a flourish. The act is a person." Maya swabbed a print off the ladder's bar and labeled the bag with the neat lowercase she used when she wanted facts to look small next to her comm. "Rune's prints are on the battery. We'll see whose are on the hook." They closed the cab and walked the perimeter, scanning for a maintenance trench the municipal plans promised and gravity loved. Near the tower base, winter had splayed open a panel of earth like a book. The trench's mouth held the kind of detritus you only find where someone has tried to make significance. A lens cap kicked into a corner and then retrieved and placed. A key fob, a bread knife, tokens. They would catalog them later. For now, the tower remained the task, the throat the subject. Back at the station, Rune paid his courtesy visit to the interview room with a lawyer whose suit had a town council discount. He sat with his hands on the table, palms down, fingers making a stray cluster of tapping noises until Maya's look taught them to behave. You put your hands on a battery in a tower that made a tone that made my witnesses sick, Maya said without preamble. She was not unkind. She was precise. You cut a slit to a length that sings. You placed a transducer to carry the tone when wind went home. You drew angles from roofs to the cab. You stocked resin. You bought nylon line. Rune didn't look at the photographs. Kids climb, he said. Men drink, then climb. I needed to keep them out. The council did not budget for a fence. I made a sound. A spooky sound. They didn't like it. They leave. I keep the village safe. You're welcome. Infrasound doesn't keep teens out, Aaron said from the back of the room. It makes them film. It makes them stay and see things longer. It makes their minutes longer. You built an amplifier for attention. Did you put anyone on a roof? Rune's eyes developed a stubborn glaze. The look men get when they insist their version of themselves is the only one that can be prosecuted. I did not touch anyone, he said. I warned. I sang the tower a little song to teach the village. You have old men complaining you never thank them. Maya folded the photograph of the hook ladder until the crease lay across the polished mouth. Whose ladder is that, in your cab? She asked. Kids, he said without conviction. They hide things up there. I tidy. You don't tidy resin, Aaron said. You apply it. He turned his hands palm up as if to show them they were clean. The skin bore the pale scars of wire and winter, not the dark scrapes of fresh tar. His prints on the battery were old enough to have gathered dust. That would let him believe his lie a little longer. They ended the interview at the precise moment the lawyer became useful and useless in the same breath. Outside, wind thumbed the slit and the tower moaned its vowel to an empty road. The village did what villages do. It translated the moan into story, the story into proof, the proof into orders, the orders into acts. Aaron stood under the tower's mouth and let the pressure sit behind her eyes until she wanted to rub at it and then did not, because resisting the urge was the only control she would have tonight. She walked a slow circle around the base, eye on the guy wires, ear on the tone. She pictured Oscar's ledger open on his bench, with its careful times and addresses like appointments with a sky. She pictured a silhouette raised on a line for the fun of it, the real weight climbing a real hook while the village's seconds softened like bread left too long by the oven. She pictured Rune at the switch, not a switch really but a fuss over a battery that made him feel like a man with a lever big enough to move a story. This is the mouth, she said, half to Maya, half to the metal. It doesn't confess. It vibrates, but it explains why the village heard its own certainty louder at midnight. They sealed the hatch and left the padlock hanging, tagged, photographed, and recorded on every list that mattered. The wind took a breath and the moan stepped down a frequency like a choir boy's voice cracking. Somewhere, a dog whined and then pretended it hadn't. The cab held a salvaged transducer, a car battery, and a wind-driven alternator feeding a tune slit that sang at 18 to 19 hertz. Shelves stacked with house number stencils, chalked sightlines, resin pots, and coils of black nylon, the props for a stage. The hooks in the cab matched our equals 21 cm and the feathered crownware. Thermal and seismic still said human weight, not puppets. Rune's prince rode the battery. He called it a lesson for kids. The build was too deliberate for a bedtime story. Jens Vick did not come home. It was the kind of absence that doesn't set off alarms, not at first. His partner texted twice around dusk with the ordinary courtesies that keep people together. Soup's on, don't track in snow. The messages stayed blue. At 2200, she called Maya with the calm of someone who wants to believe she is overreacting and the precision of someone who has learned not to. He left with a bag, she said. Said he was going to prove a point. He took the old hooks, not the good ones. The ones he curses. What point? Maya asked. That cowboys die, the woman said. He said it like a joke he didn't want me to laugh at. Aaron and Maya went to the shed. The stock 19-centimeter hooks were gone from their pegs, an absence outlined by clean wood around dirty ghosts. The bench had the neat disorder of a man who works until he has to go think. A note under the magnet bottle opener. Line straight/witnesses crooked. No signature. Jens's hands had written it by the way the letters looked tired. By 23:30, the village had tightened its shoulders for another show. The tower's slit took the wind like a reed takes a lip. The infrasound came on lower tonight, a velvet pressure behind the eyes rather than a thumb. Aaron put the LF mic at the base and tuned the spectrogram like a sailor listening for a shoal. Peaks rose and fell in 18.2 to 19.1 hertz like breath. Same windows? Maya asked. Wider, Aaron said. Whoever's running this wants certainty. At 1 minute and 8 seconds the first seismic cough came. Rune's cottage this time, the smallest house on the lane, its ridge a modest pretension under a chimney that wore its little metal cap like a crown it hadn't asked for. The hook set with a sound you could mistake for a sigh if you needed to keep your beliefs intact. Rune's roof, the tech said. He didn't bother to hide the quiet satisfaction that comes when a story points at the person who built the stage. Hold, Maya said. No ladders yet. Aaron took an attic across from Rune's with a view that fit in a camera frame like it had been waiting. She opened the casement a crack so the cold could keep the glass honest. The long exposure made the sky a slow spill of charcoal. The ridge cut the spill into two truths. Below, the warm plane of ceiling heat. Above, the night that wanted to be believed. At 0:02 a.m. figure stood on Rune's ridge. It was the shape the village had been training itself to see. Human height, arms at sides, stance narrow from fear or skill. The infrasound made the seconds pour like syrup. The long exposure ate light and gave her micromotions. A sway so slight it might have been wind, repeating at 9-second intervals as if a hidden metronome had been set inside the muscles of the calves. 9 seconds, Aaron said into the recorder. Balance reflex period. Human, awake, cold, controlling it. The seismic trace wrote a continuous load. Not 16 seconds. Not a staccato of test and lift. A flat, terrible line with little scallops where ankles told the body to live. The tower's tone threaded through it, a needle in a pulse. Street-level witnesses began their chorus. The neighborhood chat lit like a votive rack. Roll call. Rune's roof. Not moving. 5 minutes. 10. Hold. Maya repeated into the radio, because the impulse to rush a ladder was the oldest good idea in the book and also tonight's worst. We need the who as much as the what. At 0:07 the figure had not moved more than the volume of a breath. Aaron counted sway cycles, 60. The long exposure drew a faint nimbus around the head where breath plumed and smeared, then vanished as the wind took it low along the ridge. No plume where a face would have offered heat to the sky. The infrasound pulled at her temporal bone until she wanted to grind her teeth and then remember not to. The gutters along Rune's eaves had been wiped since yesterday, polite as a lie. On the left corner, under the ridge, the camera caught a thin glimmer, resin catching frost like sugar on the lip of a cup. The hook's mouth sat just out of sight like a snake's jaw. 11 minutes of continuous load, the tech said, then checked himself and said it again without triumph. 11 and counting. Enough, Maya said at 13 minutes and 10 seconds. A decision slammed after the door could wait no longer. Patrols 2 and 4, ladders. Quiet. No headlamps until you must. Record everything. No one talks to the figure first except me. The patrol trucks slid into position the way men slide into church late on holidays. Careful, rehearsed, hoping the performance excuses the timing. Ladders went up under mittened hands that knew their rungs. Aaron left the attic to a roof window that faced the ridge square. Her camera rattled out short exposures now, no art, just proof. Rune, Maya called up softly when her head crested the eaves and her breath found the ridge. Come down. The figure did not turn. It did not wave. A microsway at 9. Another. The village held its breath until the tower breathed for it. Not Rune, Erin said into the private channel. Her voice surprised her by how certain it was. Height wrong by 3 centimeters, give or take. Shoulders narrower. Stance like a man who has trained his ankles for chimneys. Jens, Maya breathed. At 13 minutes and 58 seconds, the figure stepped back. Not a panicked backpedal, not a slip blown into drama. A cautious, planned step shifting weight to the balls of the feet. Heel hinged over nothing, then another, and the silhouette lost its clean edge as it crossed the ridge and disappeared down the dark lee side where the snow kept secrets because it was told to. Move, Maya said, and the patrol moved, boots on rungs, hands learning again what a winter roof demands. Erin's lens caught the last clean line of a shoulder, then the black took it and made it nothing. On the far side, the prince hated camera flash and loved silence. A heel dent held the shape of a vibram with a broken chevron, the sort of detail a manufacturer would recognize at 20 paces and a defense attorney would pretend was coincidence. A resin smear strung between 2 ridge tiles like old honey pulled across toast. Resin, Erin said, because you keep saying the obvious until it is bagged. She leaned, extended, and swiped the smear with a mylar square that wanted to skitter on cold. On her glove tip, the tack bridged for a second like a strand of sugar and snapped. They tracked the path along the ridge by the small crimes it did to snow. It wasn't a running trail. It was the sober shuffle of someone keeping his center over his feet while a village watched one side of him and a drop watched the other. At the gable end, the prince stalled and then vanished into an angle that made no sense until Erin leaned farther and saw the dark cavity of a neighbor's attic vent handily close to the ridge. Someone agile, someone born to roofs, had turned his body into hinge and slid into the vent like a letter slid between door and jamb. Find the access, Maya said to the team inside the neighboring house. Don't put a boot through a child's bedroom ceiling for a man who thinks roofs are absolution. Inside that house, a father had already pulled down the attic ladder and turned a hall light on with the flat slap of someone angry with his own fear. Erin crawled under trusses through insulation that itched like remorse and found the vent's corner. Fiberglass scraped away in a smear. The duct had been pushed aside by hands that knew how to make a hole anelectric and then electric again. Out through the north gable, she said into the mic, then to the father without looking. We'll reseal it. Sorry about the mess. Outside, fresh prints led along a ridge 2 houses down, then 3. Twice, the stride shortened to nothing near a chimney where a hook could have bit, then continued without a set. He moved like a man tasting old habits, not trusting them yet. The village tracked him by the way the infrasound made people on porches point in the wrong place for the right reason. They lost him where the ridge line broke into spruce shadows. The tower hummed and took the blame as it should. Erin knelt at the last house where the prince had been clean and studied the heel dent again. The broken chevron repeated at the same place on every heel, right boot, outer edge. A chip gone from the mold or a nail put through for luck and for grip. Jens, Maya said again, same conclusion, different tone. The first time had been recognition. This time was grief borrowing a voice. Or the boots Jens loaned to be righteous, Erin said. But the stance on Rune's ridge, I'd testify. Maya looked down the lane where the village had recalibrated its bravery and come outside with phones despite orders. Their screens made small squares of daylight in the dark. The chat thread chattered like a cage of birds. 11 minutes. He stared at us. He didn't move. He moved. He fell. He vanished. He's a ghost. He's on the next house. Don't look up. Close the thread. Maya told a constable with admin rights. Call it a safety issue. Call it a school closure if you must. I don't care. Stop feeding the metronome. They circled back to Rune's eaves for the kind of evidence only roofs give. The tiny facts a courtroom can hold in hand. The resin smear she'd lifted earlier had left a second. Fainter twin halfway along the lip where a hook had swung during lift. On the crown, the feathered polish sat exactly where a 21-centimeter throat would have kissed concrete and not bitten like an animal. Erin took a last long exposure from the attic window. The ridge lay empty with that different kind of empty you get after presents. The camera made the snow into a skin under which the house's heat showed veins. The place where Jens had stood still held a pallor. Not heat or cold, but attention. Count the load, she said to the tech, and he read the number back in the clipped decimals of someone who has learned that numbers are opportunities to be made wrong. 11 minutes, 12 seconds continuous, he said. Micro sway period 9 seconds, persistent. Hook set at 1 minute and 8 seconds.
Lift at 0 oras 13 minuto 58 segundo.
2 minor shifts at 6 minutes and 10 seconds and 10 minutes and 5 seconds consistent with weight recentering. No slide on Lee. Human, Erin said again. She shut the window and watched her own breath cloud on the glass and then clear. Rune's roof chosen for symbol. Jens, if it was Jens, chooses penance or provocation. The village counts minutes that are true tonight and will be longer tomorrow in the telling. Back on the lane, the boy with the bicycle was there, older again by an hour and a fact. He lowered his phone. He was there forever, he said in the odd tone people reserve for cathedrals and crimes. He didn't move. Erin crouched so her eye line matched his. He moved every 9 seconds, she said, not unkind. That's how a person stays alive, standing very still. You filmed it. When you watch it tomorrow, you'll see the sway. It means he was real. It means he can be found. The boy swallowed. Do you want the video? Yes, she said. And then you go home. They took the clip. In it, the ridge was a straight black rule and the figure a tall addition. At 9-second clips, the shoulder made a tiny correction, and the camera's sensor, betraying its maker, made the correction into a white pixels hiccup. Proof hiding in the margin of a machine's limits. Erin saved it twice. They followed the heel dents to where the path threw itself at the stand of spruce that ran like a rib from Rune's garden toward the tower. The snow under the trees had been chewed by wind and dropped cones until it lied about prints with conviction. Still, at the edge where street met wood, a final heel had punched the crust deep enough to leave a neat chevron broken at the outer right. Toward the tower, Maya said. Toward the mouth, Erin agreed. They turned back only when the village had thinned to the people whose eyes would never close again at midnight. The tower gave a satisfied sigh at 19.0 and went down to bed like a song tired of itself. Jens was gone, and a silhouette stood on Rune's own roof. The symbol chosen, the dare accepted. Instruments logged 11 minutes 12 seconds of human load with a 9-second balance reflex. Street eyes swore to eternity. When patrol ladders crested the eaves, the figure stepped backward off the ridge and vanished along the dark lee, leaving a resin smear on the gutter and heel dents with a broken chevron that led toward the spruces and the tower. The chase failed. The trail pointed up the same hill everything else had been pointing at. The hill above Hamarvik was a map anyone could read if they let their breath slow to the same tempo as trees. Erin and Maya took it at dawn when last night's footprints had crusted and the tower's mouth only whispered. The spruce stand hissed its evergreen sibilance. Ravens wrote black commas on the pale sky and argued about grammar. They started where the heel with the broken chevron had punched the street's clean sheet and led into the woods. The drift under the first spruce lied the way wind-trained snow lies, pocked, wind-bitten, convinced of its own innocence. But men who move ladders through winters leave a second trail. Scuffs on bark at shoulder height, resin bruised and bright where a hook has kissed a trunk during a tired rest. Erin found one such kiss 3 trees in and followed its apology to a maintenance trench the municipal plan had promised and everyone else had forgotten. The trench lid, a concrete slab with rebar loops, had been levered and set down with care in a bed of pine needles that disguised scratches as squirrel work. Inside, with the tidy cruelty of arrangement, lay tokens. Not lost, not tossed, laid. A key fob with a rubber holder that said Nyberg Electric in cracked white. Oscars. A telephoto lens cap with a strip of masking tape labeled Birgit, 70, 200 in the small, patient letters of a woman who owned her decisions. A bread knife wrapped once in a bakery cloth stiff with old sugar. Lena's. Each object placed with space around it, as if for a curator's plaque that never came. Altars for the practical, Maya said. She photographed each item in situ, then again with a scale. In a separate pocket of the trench waited a folded sheet of plastic. Under it, a collapsed folding hook ladder. Erin lifted its mouth with 2 fingers the way you pick up a snake you don't want to startle into truth. Not stock. The throat measured at 21 centimeters on her tape, the numbers printing themselves with the pleased inevitability of facts that have been true all along. Along the rung knurls lay brown flakes that flinched when the light touched them. She dabbed one into a vial. It gave up its secret with the shy granularity of very old blood, oxidized to the color of rust and shame. "Hook cashed," Aaron said into the recorder. "R equals 21 cm throat. Rung knurls with brown residue, likely hemoglobin, aged. Resin smears where bar seats on crown. A low pit 2 meters off the trench held 3 pairs of boots like the end of a fairy tale, written by a municipal worker. Soles up, laces threaded through eyelets and knotted, each pair filled with pine needles and freckled with carbon black that would smear a finger. Sizes told their own half-biography. One broad and short, Lena's habit of buying warm before fashionable. One average with the outer right heel chevron broken the way last night's prince had confessed. One small and neat with the kind of wear pattern widows get when they take evening walks to keep grief elsewhere. "Graveside offerings," Maya said. She counted the pairs as if counting them made them fewer. He had them take their boots off, or he took them. Either way, it's a ritual pretending it's logistics. In a pocket notebook left under a rock that had protected it from last night's skim of dry snow, Rune had written in tidy block letters, the kind of printing taught to children who are told to be clear. "Stand and be seen. Guilt will fetch the rest." Asterisk dates lay next to the sentence, precise in a way conscience never is. The first week of silhouettes, the second, the night of 2 figures, the day Lena stopped answering her assistant's texts. Each line had a tick drawn next to it like attendance. Maya read it once in Swedish, once in English, as if translating might change what it meant. "He was keeping minutes," she said. "Roll call in his pocket. A pair of drag marks. Discreet, not panicked. Led away from the trench toward the old culvert where a spring dreamed itself into a trickle under a mesh of roots. Erin went first because she had the gloves on and because sometimes the person who reads roofs also reads hollows. The metal rim of the culvert had been pried up with something narrow and patient. Inside, damp air pushed up with the cold insistence of a cellar. "Hello?" she said, and the word crawled along the corrugations and came back with a tremor. A shape shifted in the dark. Not vermin, not wind, human. Lena lay there like a word scribbled out but not erased, her coat dark with thaw and refreeze, her wrists abraded by nylon. Skin told its small, pink truths. The pattern of burns matched the cheap black line Rune liked to stalk. Her lips moved, and the voice that came out belonged to someone who had stood still too long under a clock run by other people. "Don't look up," she whispered. Erin slid into the culvert, the cold closing quickly around her ankles. "Lena," she said, and kept her voice in the space where urgency and softness overlap. "It's Erin. Inspector Lind is here. We've got you." The baker's eyes found Erin's in the slit of light and flinched away as if the focus hurt. "He said," she murmured, inhaling shallow to keep the cold from owning her lungs. "He said you stand until they understand. He said we owe them stillness. He said guilt makes the rest come up like bread." "Who tied you?" Maya asked from the mouth, already on the radio for an ambulance, already reciting coordinates that would be truth soon. Rune, Lena said, the name a water-warped syllable. "And the man with chimney hands, the one who knows how to stand." "Jens," Maya said softly, not into the recorder, into herself. Lena's breath fogged the air between them and made a small weather that obeyed her and no one else. "They took my boots, said it makes you feel the ridge, said it makes you lighter. It makes you think about your feet and not the street." Erin worked the knots. The nylon had been tied by someone who knew that rope needs curves, not angles, if you want it to come free without skin. She breathed through her own anger because anger makes you clumsy, and Lena had already been handled enough by hands that confuse conviction with care. When Lena staggered into the light, the day seemed too big. It often does after a culvert. The ambulance crew made the noises trained people make. Calm, ones that draw a line around the moment and keep it from leaking. Erin handed over the vials and the notebook and the boots and the wire box of other people's tokens as if passing objects might arrest a narrative. It never does. It only gives it edges. "Rune built the mouth," Maya said. watching Lena's stretcher navigate roots and pride. Jens worked the ridge. Oscar built the tooth that fits. And Birgit curated the audience, Aaron said. A village is a machine when it decides to be. They walked the trench again, slower, now that Lena's pulse belonged to paramedics. The wind found the slit in the tower and made its vowel, not loud, only present, a pressure you mistake for thought. On the inside wall of the trench, someone had scratched marks like a prisoner's calendar. 5, then another 5, then 2. 7 in the last group. Aaron touched them through a glove and felt their ordinariness. Tokens, tools, a mouth that vibrates a clock, a pocket sermon, she said, and a culvert with a living woman repeating the only good instruction in this case. Don't look up. They sealed the trench with photographs and tape and the small ritual of saying things out loud so they stay said. The spruce shed needles on their hair and made them carry the smell of pine down to the station the way superstition just will not wash out after a night like last night. The path out of the woods ran close enough to the tower to hear it shift from 19 to 18.5 as the gust changed. Aaron could almost hear words in it the way you hear language in static when you want a message more than you want quiet. She checked herself, then checked the mics because you trust instruments when your ears have been flirting with stories. In a maintenance trench by the tower they found Oscar's van keys, Birgit's lens cap, and Lena's bread knife, arranged like offerings, plus a folding hook ladder with old blood-brown flakes on its rung knurls. A nearby pit held 3 pairs of boots stuffed with pine needles and dusted with carbon black. Rune's pocket notebook read, "Stand and be seen. Guilt will fetch the rest." Dates matched the nights. In a culvert they recovered Lena alive, wrists raw with nylon, murmuring, "Don't look up, don't look up." She named Rune and the man with chimney hands. The case had bodies attached to every mechanism now. The tower's mouth kept humming. Interview rooms smelled the same in every country. Coffee, carpet glue, and the small panic of decisions made too late. Rune Leitonen sat with his hands flat on the table like a man showing he had no cards and disliking it. His lawyer wore a suit that promised discounts and silence. Maya set photographs down in a rhythm. Battery in the tower cab, breadboard amp, the slit with a ruler across it, coils of black nylon, house number stencils, chalk sightlines, the 21-centimeter hook stroked smooth by emery cloth, the feathered polish on Lena's crown. She kept her voice even the way you carry a tray through a crowded room. "You built the sound," she said. "You tuned a slit to sing at 18 to 19 hertz. You kept the transducer on when the wind didn't want to help." Rune made a small shrug that wanted to be a moral philosophy. "Kids climb," he said. "Men drink. People fall off things. I made the steel talk so they would feel sick and leave. It is ugly, but it is effective." "The effect we measured was different," Aaron said from the back, her tone a chalk line, not a shout. She slid the spectrogram printout forward. "Witness minute stretch under infrasound. The village saw someone stand 16 seconds and remembered 5 minutes. Last night a man stood 11 minutes and will be remembered forever. You didn't make a fence, Rune. You made a metronome for fear. I did not touch anyone," he said, and he believed it the way men believe their hands were incidental to harm because their palms are clean by morning. "I played a sound to save boys from their bravery." Maya flipped to the trench photographs. Oscar's fob, Birgit's lens cap, Lena's knife, Rune's notebook. "Stand and be seen. Guilt will fetch the rest." Asterisk asterisk, she read it aloud. In Swedish first, then English. The lawyer shifted in his chair, the way counsel does when the room stops being a negotiation and becomes a mirror. "Those are words," Rune said, as if that was a defense. "They are orders," Maya said, "and they match dates. The night of 2 silhouettes. The night Lena stopped answering. Last night on your own roof." "You needed examples," Aaron said softly. Birgit turned, watching into roll call. "You made roll call into a sermon. A village that stares long enough at its roofs demands an answer from higher ground. You supplied it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "My client denies any participation in abduction or force." "Of course he does," Maya said, and collected her papers with the neatness of a woman closing a chapter, not a case. "We'll come back." They found Jens where the search expected him to be and hated that it was right. In a shed near the tower base, sitting on an upturned milk crate like a confession practicing its posture. His palms were stained with a thin coat of pine resin the color of old honey. The stove in the corner wasn't lit. He hadn't thought to be warm. Maya didn't bother with cuffs. She set water down. He didn't reach for it. The camera above the door winked its red dot. You stood on Rune's roof, she said. 11 minutes, 12 seconds. Jens stared at his hands as if they still belonged to chimneys that needed sweeping. I have stood longer for worse reasons, he said. This time I stood for a point. Which was? That cowboys die, he said, with a grimness that tried to be funny and failed. That people who make shows with roofs should remember what roofs take back. Who started the show? He met Aaron's eyes, and for a moment the sweep and the roof reader recognized each other like tradesmen nodding over a tool neither wants to see misused. Asterisk, asterisk, Oscar, asterisk, asterisk started a game, Jens said. He swapped houses with me. We stand on yours tonight, mine tomorrow, he said. So the village would see and then say what it always wanted to say. He made a hook that fit and wore the pride of it like a scarf. Why did you play? Aaron asked. Because it is hard to watch a village gnaw itself and not put your boot on its muzzle, Jens said, a bleak humor. Because I thought I could bait the person who turned watching into punishment. Because I have chimney hands and I can stand still without falling. And that felt like penance for all the times I taught boys to put their feet right when they weren't paid to learn. Maya slid a photograph across. Lena in the culvert, eyes blown from cold and dread, wrists scored by nylon. He flinched and tried not to. You put her there? She asked. He shook his head hard enough to sting. No. I stood. I baited. I told her not to stand. I told her to go. Then I wasn't there. When I came back, she was gone. And the trench had tokens like someone was building a church from other people's pockets. Who tied her? Aaron asked. Jens stared at the table, ribs moving under his sweater like a flock of small birds. Rune wanted examples, he said at last. His word. Examples. He said it after the chat turned into a roll call with minutes and head counts. He liked the sound of it. He thought if people saw standing long enough, they would understand their guilt. He would not say he tied anyone. He would say he taught. He asked me to stand to draw eyes. I did. That is on me. But the rope. He held up his raw palms. I smell like resin, not like nylon. Who handled the rope? Maya said. Oscar early, Jens said reluctantly. He said it was a ritual, his word, not mine. Stand and be seen, he said. Later, when he didn't come back, Rune said, we must continue. The village is learning. That's when it turned from a game into a coercion. We brought people to high ground. We told them to stand until they confessed to the thing the window had already decided they'd done. You know what confessions roofs take? The ones you can't hear. The ones you invent. Aaron laid the hook ladder photograph next to his hand. The brown flakes on the rung knurls were almost pretty in the way old blood sometimes is when you've never had to clean it. This isn't last night, she said. This is older. Who fell? Jens swallowed. The Adam's apple made a slow trip. The camera caught it. A week ago, he said. The night there were two silhouettes because there were three of us. Me on one roof, Oscar on another, Rune at his mouth. Oscar had the hook. He likes the front row. He popped it loose too fast going over a ridge, and the thing bit back. He went off the lee side and into trees where snow doesn't forgive. We went looking, then we didn't find him. Then we lied to ourselves because the village was still watching and we needed minutes to be longer than facts. I stood the next night because I couldn't stand not standing. Maya's pen paused above her notebook, then finished the word she'd started. Accidental. And Birgit. She made angles, he said. She drew lines from tower to roofs, and when a line didn't make a person, she made a person out of a line. She went to the quarry edge to photograph a silhouette and her boot found a skin of frost. She had tripod feet on her windowsill because she liked the distance. The world didn't give her distance where she stood. Why Rune's roof last night? Aaron asked. Because he wanted it? Jens said with a small, ugly laugh that had self in it and loathing. Said the mouth needs a face. Said the village must stare at its throat and understand it's watching itself. He called it the lesson. I called it a dare. It felt like penance until it felt like bait. When the ladders came, I did what men do who still want to live. He made a stepping motion with his hand and let it fall. 9-second sway, back over the ridge. Hidden Leah, vent, ridge run, trees. You know the rest. We know Lena named you, Maya said, not cruel. We know your hands smell like pine. We know Rune wrote a pocket sermon. Jens pinched his eyes shut. Charge me with the standing, he said. Charge me with the bait. Charge me with the lie that started as craft and ended as hurt. But don't let him talk about teaching. He taught a village to like the taste of stillness on other people's skin. They took prints. The right palm showed clean patterning. The left bore tiny resin freckles in the fingerprint valleys. They bagged his stock hooks from the wall anyway and wrote the negative results into the story because negative results are the floor under a case. Out in the corridor, the air felt like air again. Erin leaned her shoulder against the cinder block and pressed her knuckles to her brow, as if the pressure could dislodge the tower's vowel that seemed to sit there now even with the slit shut. Asterisk, asterisk, conspiracy, asterisk, asterisk, Maya said, steadying the word as she said it. False imprisonment, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, a death to be ruled, another to be found. Write it so a judge can stand on it, Erin said. Then let's find Oscar and Birgit before the village writes them into better ghosts than they deserve. They built a search grid the way you build a stage without lies, method and repetition. Dogs for the ravine line beyond the spruces, thermal drones after the wind left, not before. Teams to the old quarry lip, where a camera strap could snag and a story could end. A sweep along the tower road where a van could turn and a man with a broken chevron on his heel might have fallen and rolled into a place trees guard. Erin stood by the map and put pins where physics-suggested bodies would come to rest when humans ran out of balance. She marked catchments. Where snow slides if it slides, where hooks bite if they bite, where a fall becomes a fracture becomes a time of death that's a week old and exactly aligned with the night of two silhouettes. She wrote the numbers down because writing them is kinder than remembering them later by feel. On the way out, she passed the evidence locker. The 21-centimeter hook lay in its bag like a tool that had been asked the wrong questions by the wrong men. The jar of resin had skinned over again. Rune's notebook sat under a property tag that would one day sit under a courtroom's fluorescent light. Maya joined her at the door, collar up against a wind that had learned a new key from the slit and wouldn't stop humming it. We find them, she said. Today. Before the village has midnight again, Erin said. She imagined the roofs lifting their shoulders the way people do when they think they're being watched, the way people do when they like it. They stepped into a day that had the color of work. The tower stood like a throat cleared of words and full of breath. Down in the village, blinds twitched, then pretended they hadn't. The snow waited with its perfect blank page. Under interview, Rune admitted the infrasound build as a lesson, but denied touching anyone. His notebook, asterisk asterisk, stand and be seen. Guilt will fetch the rest. And the tower's hardware undercut the story. Jens was found near the tower with resin on his palms. He confessed to roof standing as penance/bait, named Oscar as the one who started the game, and described how the missing were brought to high ground. Asterisk asterisk coercion asterisk asterisk, not ritual. The hook ladder bore older blood. Jens said Oscar fell on the first two silhouettes night. With confessions in hand, they pushed a search grid toward the woods ravine and the old quarry to find Oscar and Birgit before the village could turn midnight into another story. The ravine waited where map and gravity promised it would. A white seam stitched into the spruce with thread dark as thaw. Searchers moved along its lip in a chess pattern. Sound off, pause, sound off. So a voice could find distance to travel and come back with an echo that meant landmark, not ghost. Erin took the slope the way a roof worker takes a pitch. Weight low, steps placed, hands ready to admit the mistake if it came. A span of low branches had been broken weeks ago. The ends wore snow beads like enamel. Below, a scuff formed a triangle of kicked crust and frozen duff. 10 meters farther, The pattern ended where the ravine's mouth opened into ice scar and the faint, cold glitter of trampled sap. There, half hidden by blowdown and humility, lay Oscar Nyberg. He had the look of a man who had left the room mid-argument and run out of words. His body had turned itself into a stopped proof. One leg tangled in a folding hook ladder, the throat of the hook polished to the same 21 centimeters that had rerun itself through the case like a chorus. Snow had starred into his beard. A thread of resin had dried along his cuff like a hard tear. The medic knelt and did what medics do when the ritual matters and the outcome does not. Maya stood above, mouth set to the line people use when they cannot give a better shape to kindness. Erin held the lamp and kept her breath slow enough to taste facts. The skull told its own time. At the base, where vertebrae become confession, a fracture painted itself in faint ochre beneath winter's bleach. No fresh bleeding to argue. Just the kind of basilar break a fall gives when a ridge lets go of a man who trusted his own engineering. Wristwatch frozen by impact had done them the courtesy of a clock. A week prior, at an hour that would become a story long before it became a report. They would count back to the night of two silhouettes and find him here, day after day, while a village miscounted its minutes. Cause of death consistent with fall from roof line, the medical examiner said, voice careful as a scalpel. Estimated date 7 nights before discovery. Cold has preserved what it could. Maya exhaled a shape into the air. The first night the village saw 2, she said. 3 on the stage, 1 at the mouth, 2 on the ridge. 1 did not leave. They tagged and lifted and made the photographs that make a life small enough to carry to a courtroom. The hook came free from the mess of his leg with a sound like apology. Erin measured it because she could not measure it. R equals 21 cm. Rung spacing 42 cm. The resin on the bar smelled of someone who believed in grip more than in mercy. She bagged a shaving from the rung knurls where old brown still clung, aged to iron in the cold. Up the hill, the old quarry kept its rim under a snow that lied sedately about edges. Footing was worse here, fine, treacherous granules over stone that had learned to be glass. The searchers marked each other with string lines and patience. At the lip, a tripod leg had bitten, then slid. A camera strap had twisted and trapped itself around a bush in a panic's quick knot. 10 meters downslope, facing the village that had been her audience, lay Birgit home. Her face was unbruised the way winter sometimes is kind. Her hands wore the small, protective injuries of a fall. Scrapes on the back, fingers curled as if saving the last sentence. The camera lay near, lens hood cracked like a bell. The memory card had the ordinary obstinacy of plastic. Erin slid it clear and sealed it. Maya bagged the tripod feet, the strap, the section of rim where black ice had worn a mirror into the rock. Post-mortem will tell you what you already know, the examiner said gently. Slip and fall. Time frame matches Oscar's within a day. Not staged. Bad luck weaponized by purpose. They looked at what she had been looking at. The village roofs drawn neat as charts, angles from the tower cab to each ridge like lines on a geometry test. On the last exposure Birgit had made, they found her answer, an answer that could not save her. The frame held a roof in the mid-distance with a silhouette perched on its ridge like a confession. In the corner, reflected in a double-glazed ghost, a second, fainter figure. The photographer herself, backlit by her own vigil, the tripod's legs making a 3-legged shadow. Birgit had staged a proof and fallen between subject and self. Her silhouette, Erin said, not triumphant. Her own. The line makes the person makes the line. Maya closed the camera bag and looked down at the neat woman who had organized flu week soup and midnight accusations with equal competence. We'll tell it right, she said. Not as penance, as physics. They shut the tower's mouth with a lock the council would recognize on a requisition line. The transducer came out of its cradle with more reluctance than a man. But it came. The alternator belt drooped. The slit hummed once at a gust and then, without a diaphragm to keep the tone alive, let the wind pass with nothing to push. The LF mic listened and recorded nothing but weather. Below, the sightings stopped as predictably as a habit unlearned. At midnight, the village did what the village had forgotten how to do. It slept on purpose or pretended better. Curtains stayed still. Dogs did not pace. The instruments showed no more infrasound windows. The spectrogram's blade went flat, and witnesses who checked their watches out of loyalty found nothing to anchor a story to. Aaron and the techs took the evidence through its last proofs. Roof residues on the Andersons, the bakery, Rune's cottage, carbon black married to pine resin in the same ratios as the jar from the tower cab, stigmatic, indiscreet. The feathered crownware matched the practice cap in the cab. The R equals 21 mouth had left the same even rub, a polished benediction on Lena's chimney. In the lab, they pushed Jens's prints against the ladder's bar, negative where the metal had been wiped and resin had laid a skin, then placed Rune's hands squarely on the battery and the breadboard amp, fingerprints laid down with the bored confidence of a caretaker assembling a scare. Chains complete, the analyst said, checking boxes the way a clerk girds a verdict for its journey. Tower to resin, resin to gutters, gutters to hook, hook to crown, crown to time windows. Lena's statement intact, tokens from the trench corroborative. Chat logs established the roll call. Burgett's slides from safety into incitement. They served warrants that had been waiting on tables like hounds at a kennel gate. Rune Leighton was arrested between two sentences at his kitchen sink. He had the grace to wash his cup and set it on the drainer. He did not have the grace to keep his mouth closed. I tried to teach them, he said to the hallway, to the neighbor's ears through plaster. No one taught you when you were young? You complain about the cold and the noise, and then you cry when people fall. Which would you like? Neither, Maya said. We'd like you to stop making choices for people who didn't ask you to be a metronome. Jens did not run. He brought the stock hooks in a bundle and set them on the property desk with a defeat neat enough to be policy. Charge the standing, he said when the list of counts began. Charge the bait. I'll speak to Lena if she wants. If she doesn't, I won't ask for that mercy. In Aaron's memo, the closing section read like an inventory of a machine dismantled. Asterisk hook ladder geometry. Custom R equals 21 cm throat, 42 cm rung cadence, recovered at trench and tower. Crown where consistent. Stock R equals 19 excluded by contact pattern. Asterisk tar blister dating. Inward sunk ruptures mapped to midnight dips. Thermal negative anomalies, wind shear void, coincide with seismic roof loads. Asterisk infrasound mapping. Tower slit length 73 times 3 cm. Tone 18-19 Hz under gust. Transducer sustained tone during lulls. Perceptual stretch documented via witness/time deltas. Asterisk seismic load signatures. Discrete 16-second events on early nights. Continuous 11:12 on Rune's roof. Microsway at 9s period confirms human balance reflex. She stapled Lena's statement to the packet like a final, necessary weight. Don't look up, it said where it needed to say more, and then said more. Names, manipulations, boot removals, and chilly sermons. The smell of pine that had become the case's liturgy. The prosecutor read and nodded and began to make the paper walk. False imprisonment, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, conspiracy, asterisk Oscar, accidental death by fall, Burgett, accidental death by slip. The paragraphs lined up obediently because facts had been cleaned of the village's love for elaboration. At dusk, Aaron walked the lane once so the roofs could prove to her they could be ordinary again. At the Andersons, the ridge held the day's last heat without anyone stealing it. At the bakery, the cap gleamed dull as proper metal. Rune's eaves had dried with that flaked edge resin leaves when it no longer has anyone to please. She laid a palm flat to a ridge cap warmed by a pair of faint hours of sun and listened for any murmur of old obsession. The tar was quiet. Inside a house that had stopped counting minutes. A child's drawing hung from a clip over a radiator. A rectangle, a triangle, an oblong chimney. No figure on the roof. 2 windows with friendly dots for eyes. Smoke like a thought that didn't need to be anything else. Aaron smiled in the way you do when an image gives your lungs permission. On the way back to the car, Maya asked the question they owed the place. How do we tell them? She said. Not the charges. The part about everyone building the ghost. The part about minutes that were feelings. The part about no one wanting to own a stage after the curtain comes down. Truth with enough physics to hold it up, Aaron said. No sermons. What the tower did. Where the hook bit. How long a calf can keep a man upright before he needs to believe he is a statue. Why a village looked up and found itself. Will they stop looking up? Not soon, Aaron said. They'll pretend not to. That is its own looking. But the roofs will be quiet. And the mouth will be shut. That helps. They filed the last labels, the small acts that make a case a case. On the desk, the 21-centimeter hook sat inert under plastic, terrible and ordinary. In her notebook, Erin wrote the single sentence she uses when work has to turn into story for others. When a community practices surveillance long enough, something will answer from higher ground. This time, it was human. Outside, the wind found other instruments to play. The tower, dumb now, was only weathered iron shaking in a season that forgives nothing and remembers everything. On the village street, a person closed a curtain without drama, and behind it, someone else finally looked down. Oscar recovered in the ravine, fatal basilar skull fracture, time of death a week prior, aligning with the first ***, 2 silhouettes *** night. Birgit recovered near the quarry lip, camera strap tangled. Her last frame captured her own silhouette in reflection as she staged a shot, then slipped on frost. With Rune arrested and the tower silenced, the sightings ceased. Instruments recorded no more infrasound windows. Roof residues matched Rune's resin pots and Jens's hookware. Lena's statement and the trench tokens cemented charges. What remained was the telling. How to return a village's gaze to earth without pretending it hadn't loved the height. Paperwork is the last whether a case must pass through. It bleaches heat, rounds edges, makes storms readable. Maya spread the charging sheets across the incident board and let them harden into nouns. Rune Leighton, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint. Jens Vick, accomplice liability, unlawful restraint, reckless endangerment. Oscar Nyberg, accidental death, fall from height. Birgit Holm, accidental death, fall at quarry rim. Names that had occupied roofs now occupied lines. The pen gave them borders the night had never respected. Aaron wrote the technical memo as if it were a spare scaffold. No ornaments, enough strength to stand on. She assigned the numbers their places. ***, hook ladder geometry ***, R equals 21 cm throat, 42 cm rung cadence, crownware feathering consistent with a custom mouth, tar blister inversions dating to midnight temperature dips, seismic load signatures, discrete 16s on early nights, continuous 11:12 on Rune's Ridge with 9s balance reflex, infrasound mapping, slit 73 times 3 cm, tone 18, 19 Hz, transducer sustained during lulls. Witness/time deltas explained by vestibular stretch. She attached the spectrograms and the stills of the cool void above the bakery cap. Those thin blue ribs where warmth should have pooled and did not because a human had stood there and made absence measurable. The prosecutor read, underlined twice, and said, "We can carry this." She meant a courtroom would, reluctantly and then obediently, agree to the shape of reality presented to it. The tower did not get its day in court. It got a cutting torch at 10 in the morning, a municipal crew in bright vests, and a foreman who said, "Careful," like a prayer. The cab came down in 4 sections. The slit became scrap. The alternator went onto a pallet with the dignified shame of salvage. The transducer went into a brown evidence box marked release after trial in a hand neat enough to be trusted. Rune watched from a window he no longer owned the view from. He had become the sort of man who lifts a mug to his lips and only afterward notices there is nothing in it. Lena left before dawn with a suitcase that had learned the weight of bread tools and the lightness of a person's last patience. The new baker, a cousin, learned where the oven door sticks and how the town wants its crust stained. On Saturdays, the line on the lane formed at the old hour out of habit. The first weeks, laughter had an echo in it as if sound missed a tower's mouth to bounce from. That faded, the way attentions do when they aren't rehearsed. On the first night without silhouettes, the village tried to prove it was brave enough to ignore roofs. It succeeded only in darkness. Windows stayed dark. People talked quietly in kitchens and insisted they were discussing potatoes. Street noises seemed wrong without the nightly looking up, and in that wrongness was an absence it would take weeks to name as relief. The boys with bikes became boys without a project. Their phones turned to hockey highlights and weather reports. When they passed the Andersons' Bend, their faces did not move, which is its own movement. Aaron walked the lane with Maya at last light because the body insists on proof. The Andersons' Ridge wore its small hoard of daytime heat like a cat that has found the right sill. The bakery cap kept its blackness without charity. Rune's eaves had flakes of resin drying into cinnamon sugar scabs no one would scrape because no one needed them to be gone to believe they could be. "We will be asked to say it yesterday," Maya said. A press conference with verbs improved by hindsight. A town hall with adjectives rescued from rumor. "We'll say how," Aaron said. "No saints, no monsters. A tuned slit and a custom hook and the crowd's metronome. What the wind did at 19 cycles. Where the hook kissed concrete. How long a person can be a statue before he's only a man again. And then we'll stop speaking before the room tries to make a parable and let the physics do the last paragraph." "Will they forgive each other?" Maya asked. "They will forget," Aaron said. "It looks the same from a distance." The neighborhood chat limped back toward weather and school closings. Someone posted a photograph of a cat in a window, a silent joke that rescued no one and harmed no one either. The thread's pinned message, eyes up, went down the list and then fell off without ceremony. The moderator blamed a software update. It was kinder and true from one angle. At the station, the hook sat under plastic like a fossil of the moment when a village let an object tell it who it was. The jar of resin had skinned again. Someone had written "Do not open" on the lid in marker. Rune's notebook lay filed under a number that gave it anonymity it had not earned. Jens's statement held its crowded clauses without apology and ended with a sentence he had written 3 times and crossed out twice. I stood. He had left the third legible. Some confessions respect ink. Aaron signed the last chain of custody and allowed herself the luxury of a small thought. That roofs are not altars by nature, only by invitation. She walked out into a dusk the color of labor well spent and breathed air that belonged only to air. She paused under a ridge and laid her palm flat to the cap the way she always does when a place has given up its secrets and she is about to give the place back to itself. Warmth came up through the metal, a simple radiance with no story in it. In an attic behind her, a radiator ticked like a happy clock, and a drawing hung from a clip. A house with a chimney and no person on the roof. A tree, possibly an apple, with circles that could be fruit or snow. A line of smoke that looked like someone remembering how to hum. "Case closed," Maya said at her shoulder. It was not triumph. It was maintenance. Aaron nodded. "When a village stares long enough at its own roofs, something climbs up," she said. The sentence now a tool put away clean. This time it was human. The quiet after feels like superstition cured, and like a space something could fill again if invited. They did not look up as they walked to the car. It was a deliberate choice, which is one kind of freedom. The tower was just steel waiting for a truck. The snow made its small squeaks that mean nothing and everything. The eaves, thin as ever, held. The rooftops of Hamarvik have gone quiet now. The silhouettes are gone. The tower dismantled. The tar healed under the sun. What lingers is not a ghost, but a reminder. When a community stares too long into its own fear, sometimes the fear learns how to stare back. Thank you for walking with us through midnight above the eaves, for standing with Detective Aaron Dahl and Inspector Maya Lind as they pulled physics out of superstition and found people where others swore they had seen shadows. Your time and attention are what keep these investigations alive. If you want more journeys into the strange, the grim, and the unresolved, remember, thanks for listening. Subscribe for more gripping audio stories.